For the record, my name is Mary Rarick, and I am currently serving in the Minnesota House of Representatives in House District 29B. I am a member on the Minnesota House Fraud Prevention and State Agency Oversight Committee, which was recently formed in January of 25. I was first asked to serve on the committee on January 4th, and soon after, the 5 Republican members began to meet. During one of those discussions, I was asked to reach out to the Department of Human Services whistleblowers on X, now called Minnesota Staff Fraud Reporting Commentary. I had been following them in the previous year. I reached out through a direct tweet on X on January 16th, and the very same day I got a response back that yes, they would be willing to speak to the Fraud Prevention Committee. Since that first contact, Chair Robbins and I and Representative Hudson have had multiple conference calls with them, and we have had one in-person meeting. At that meeting, they were both former and current employees. I've continued to message with them very often, sometimes daily, and their collective message has been completely consistent. Instead of focusing on fraudsters, DHS leadership instead focused its surveillance on employees. Since then, their expressed fear of retaliation has intensified under an avalanche of fraud in Minnesota. Their numbers have grown from 480 DHS employees, both current and former, to over 1,000 across multiple state agencies. They have told me repeatedly how grateful they are to the House Fraud Prevention Committee for focusing our attention on fraud in the state programs, using their inside information while keeping them completely protected. They have explained that they live in a constant state of fear of retaliation. One only has to look at what happened to FA Bernstein to understand why. In a very recent Newsweek article dated December 13th of 25, Ms. Bernstein, a former compliance specialist, stated, Minnesota DHS functions in the opposite manner as you would think. Employees who suggest improvements or, heaven forbid, report fraud then face significant retaliation. The messenger is shot. In 2019, Bernstein said she alerted Minnesota DHS officials to sloppy contracting practices that were not legally compliant. But it's not what most people would even consider fraud. She says she was later escorted out of the building, faced lengthy investigation, got trespassed from all DHS owned and leased properties, and received involuntary transfer to another state agency. So she says, so today if someone asks me, should I report fraud within DHS, I say no, no, no. It is career suicide plus a whole lot more. So let's talk about that plus a whole lot more. In our face-to-face meetings with a group of whistleblowers, they revealed that retaliation now includes threats of being fired with cause, which means you do not get unemployment insurance in the state of Minnesota, being blacklisted from all state agencies, and I would note most likely our largest counties as well, which are Democrat-run. And then there was a veiled threat of the use of military intelligence against them. They later informed me that it was discovered that in some targeted employees or suspected whistleblowers' personnel files were pictures of their homes and their cars. They also described that supervisors asked them questions about their families that to them felt like a threat. One example was, we need to know where your kids go to school and where their bus stops are. I will also note that whistleblowers we spoke to described many times that DHS used surveillance programs to surveil employees' emails and chats and other communications, looking for keywords like fraud, double billing, underspending, and overpayments. One example that the whistleblowers let me know about Lieutenant Governor Flanagan. April 12th, 2024. Flanagan comes to a DHS Health and Human Services Equity Conference at the Heritage Center in Brooklyn Center. On stage, Flanagan acknowledges the X account and the fraud concerns it raised and publicly denounced the X users and called them weirdos and losers sitting in their mother's basement. This was in a public setting with hundreds of participants and it elicited gasps among the crowd. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Mary Rarick delivers explosive testimony on Minnesota DHS whistleblower retaliation. The committee now recognizes Representative Mary Rarick for her opening statement. Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Mary Rarick, and I currently serve in the Minnesota House of Representatives, representing House District 29B. I am a member of the Minnesota House Fraud Prevention and State Agency Oversight Committee, which was formed in January 2025. I was asked to join this committee on January 4th. Shortly thereafter, the 5 Republican members began meeting to discuss concerns related to fraud within state agencies. During one of those discussions, I was asked to reach out to Department of Human Services whistleblowers who were communicating publicly on X, formerly Twitter, under the name Minnesota Staff Fraud Reporting Commentary. I had followed this group the previous year. On January 16th, I contacted them directly through X, and that same day they responded, agreeing to speak with the Fraud Prevention Committee. Since that initial contact, Chair Robbins, Representative Hudson, and I have held multiple conference calls with these whistleblowers, as well as one in-person meeting. The group includes both current and former DHS employees. I have continued communicating with them frequently, sometimes daily, and their message has remained entirely consistent. They told us that instead of focusing on fraudsters, DHS leadership has focused its surveillance efforts on employees. Their fear of retaliation has only intensified as fraud in Minnesota state programs has continued to grow. Initially, the group consisted of approximately 480 current and former DHS employees. That number has now grown to more than 1,000 individuals across multiple state agencies. They have repeatedly expressed gratitude to the House Fraud Prevention Committee for bringing attention to fraud in state programs and for using their insider information while keeping their identities protected. The whistleblowers describe living in a constant state of fear. To understand why, one need only look at the case of former DHS compliance specialist FA Bernstein. In a Newsweek article published on December 13, 2025, Bernstein stated that Minnesota DHS operates in the opposite way most people would expect. According to her, employees who suggest improvements or report potential fraud face significant retaliation. In her words, "The messenger is shot." Bernstein said that in 2019 she alerted DHS officials to sloppy contracting practices that were not legally compliant. While these issues were not what most would consider outright fraud, she says the consequences were severe. She was escorted out of the building, subjected to a lengthy investigation, trespassed from all DHS-owned and leased properties, and involuntarily transferred to another state agency. She later said that if asked whether someone should report fraud within DHS, her answer would be no, calling it career suicide, plus a whole lot more. That whole lot more was detailed during our face-to-face meetings with whistleblowers. They told us retaliation now includes threats of termination for cause, meaning the loss of unemployment benefits, blacklisting from all state agencies, and potentially from Minnesota's largest counties as well. They also described what they viewed as veiled threats involving the use of military intelligence. In some cases, personnel files of targeted or suspected whistleblowers reportedly contained photographs of their homes and vehicles. Whistleblowers also reported being questioned by supervisors about their families in ways that felt threatening. One example included being asked where their children attend school and where their bus stops are located. Additionally, they described DHS using surveillance programs to monitor employee emails, chats, and communications, searching for keywords such as fraud, double billing, underspending, and overpayments. One specific incident involved Lieutenant Governor Peggy Flanagan. On April 12, 2024, she attended a DHS Health and Human Services Equity Conference at the Heritage Center in Brooklyn Center. During her remarks, she acknowledged the X account raising fraud concerns, publicly denounced those involved, and referred to them as weirdos and losers sitting in their mother's basement.